The samurai code, no one was meant to find. Before the sword, before the armor, before the word samurai was ever spoken, there was something else. A shadow, not the shadow of a man, but the shadow of a rule. A rule so old, so deeply embedded in the human instinct to survive, that even today, centuries later, you are still living inside its echo. Imagine a battlefield at dawn. The fog is thick, swallowing sound, swallowing distance, swallowing certainty itself. Somewhere in that fog, a man kneels. He does not scream. He does not pray. He does not even breathe loudly. He waits, because the samurai did not begin as warriors. They began as witnesses, witnesses to a system that rewarded silence more than strength, patience more than power, and obedience more than bravery. What if I told you that the samurai were not designed to fight first, but to endure first? That their earliest purpose was not to kill, but to remember, to record invisible rules no one else could see, but everyone had to obey? This is where the mystery begins. Because the samurai code that later became known as Bushido was not written at the start. It was hidden, passed not through books, but through gestures, through rituals, through what was not said. And what was not said is always where the real story lives. In the year 1180, something happened in Japan that history barely mentions. Not because it was small, but because someone made sure it stayed invisible. In a remote temple, high in the mountains, a collection of scrolls vanished overnight. Not stolen, not destroyed by accident, carefully removed. Each scroll bore the same symbol, a circle, broken by a single vertical line. No one knows who drew it. No one knows what language it belonged to. And no one knows why every record of it disappeared. Except one, a fragment, no larger than a human palm, resurfaced centuries later inside a wooden box sealed with wax and iron. On it were only 3 words, written in archaic kanji. They must not remember. Remember what? That question haunted historians for generations. Some believed it referred to a lost battle. Others thought it pointed to a forbidden ritual. But what if it referred not to an event, but to a system? What if the samurai were not just warriors protecting lords, but custodians protecting a secret architecture of power itself? This is where the story becomes dangerous. Because if you uncover a forgotten battle, you rewrite a chapter of history. But if you uncover a forgotten system, you rewrite the rules of reality. And the samurai, it turns out, were not protecting kings. They were protecting something far more fragile: memory. The earliest samurai did not carry swords into battle. They carried messages. They were not hired to fight wars. They were hired to end them before they began. During Japan's Heian period, powerful families controlled land not through armies, but through information. Who owed whom? Which marriage alliance was breaking? Which harvest was failing? Which lord was about to rebel? The first samurai were not soldiers. They were walking databases in a world without paper trails, human firewalls in an era without encryption. Their most dangerous weapon was not steel. It was discretion. And discretion, as it turns out, is the rarest form of power. Because power that announces itself invites resistance. But power that hides inside rules becomes invisible. The samurai learned this before anyone else. Their loyalty was not to a person, but to a structure. A structure that said, stability is more important than truth. Order is more important than justice. Continuity is more important than mercy. Does that sound familiar? It should, because those same principles quietly run modern corporations, governments, and even social networks. The samurai were not just warriors of feudal Japan. They were architects of organizational psychology centuries before the term existed. And yet, something went wrong. Something that turned silent messengers into armored killers. And that transformation holds the darkest mystery of all. No scroll records this night. No chronicle describes it. No poem mourns it. And yet, every samurai who came after lived inside its consequences. It happened sometime in the late 12th century. A gathering of warriors, nobles, and monks met behind closed doors, far from the capital, far from witnesses, far from anything that could later be proven. What they discussed was not a battle plan. It was a redesign of reality. Because the system the samurai were guarding was failing. Information no longer stabilized power. It destabilized it. Lords hoarded secrets instead of sharing them. Alliances became traps instead of safeguards. Silence stopped being protection and started being betrayal. So the rules changed. The samurai were no longer meant to observe power. They were meant to enforce it. But enforcement requires justification. And justification requires belief. So a philosophy was built. Not in books, but in blood. Not in sermons, but in sacrifice. A new narrative emerged: honor above life, loyalty above truth, death above dishonor. This was the birth of Bushido as we think we know it. But what history doesn't tell you is that Bushido was not discovered. It was engineered, and every engineered system has an exploit. The mystery is not how the samurai became warriors. The mystery is how no one noticed they had become something else entirely. Every system produces anomalies, and in the samurai world, anomalies were dangerous, because the entire structure depended on obedience to death. There is a story whispered among monks in rural Japan about a nameless samurai who refused to draw his sword. Not because he was afraid, but because he believed the system itself had become the enemy. According to legend, he was ordered to execute a peasant accused of hiding rice from a lord. The samurai investigated. He found the peasant's children starving. The rice was not stolen. It was survival. The samurai refused the order. That alone should have ended the story. Disobedience meant death, yet the samurai did not die. Instead, he vanished. His armor was found near a river. His sword was left at a shrine. His name was erased from every record. But here is where the mystery deepens. Years later, villages that had once been ruled by cruelty began operating under unwritten laws of fairness. Taxes became lighter, punishments became rarer, lords became quieter. Something had changed, but no one could trace how. What if the samurai didn't disappear? What if he became something else? Not a warrior, not a rebel, but a ghost in the system. A silent virus inside the code of Bushido itself. Because sometimes, the most powerful rebellion is not to fight the system. It is to behave as if it no longer exists. In 1333, two armies faced each other across a valley. Thousands of samurai, tens of thousands of soldiers, weeks of marching, months of preparation, years of hatred, and then nothing happened. No charge, no arrows, no clash of steel. The armies stood, waited, watched, and eventually, one side turned around and went home. No treaty, no surrender, no explanation. History records this as a diplomatic miracle, a bloodless victory, a triumph of reason. But buried in a monk's diary found centuries later was a single line: the order never arrived. Which order? Not the command to attack, the command to hate, because someone had altered the information chain. A messenger was delayed, a scroll was misdirected, a signal was reinterpreted, and in that delay, something extraordinary happened. The soldiers looked at each other, not as enemies, but as men. And when you see your enemy as a man, killing stops being automatic. This is the hidden power the samurai once wielded before they became warriors. The power not to fight, the power to make fighting unnecessary. And the mystery is not how battles were fought. The mystery is how many battles were never fought, and how close we still are, today, to learning that same skill again. Thank you for watching. Japan's history still hides countless secrets, and we're just getting started. If you want to uncover more mysteries of samurai, ninja, and ancient Japan, subscribe and join us on this journey through time.